50s and the 60s really saw the emergence of a number of entrepreneurial, usually Jewish, big characters who set up their own firms. Probably the best of all of them, David Napley, Kingsley Napley.
Well, in the 1960s, the firm moved further into the licensing arena. And one of the clubs that came to Sir David asking for representation was a series of clubs, as I understand it, called the Keyhole Club. He was approached by the owner of one of the clubs who was having a difficulty with the police in the sense that he was being prosecuted for corrupting public morals. These clubs were the early days of the strip joint clubs in central London. He therefore asked for two of the performers from this club to attend the office, where they simulated sexual intercourse in full clothing in front of Sir David in his office. He commented afterwards that he felt that anyone attending those clubs would be fully aware as to what they were attending, but he felt that they would be leaving the club in a state of severe disappointment.
Another very famous case that the firm was involved in was the Ian Ball case. Ian Ball had been arrested, it was alleged, attempting to kidnap Princess Anne, having shot her security guard in the mall. And it was quite clear to the chief Metropolitan Magistrate that it was imperative that Ian Ball should be represented, and also should be represented by someone who knew what they were doing. And it was a result of that concern that he contacted David Napley, whom he had known for many years, and asked if he would be prepared to act, albeit on legal aid, for Ian Ball. And of course David said yes, of course he would.
I started in the 70s, so David was very much in vogue. He was on television, and the big case at the moment, or probably of the decade, was Jeremy Thorpe.
There had been a long-running campaign, started originally by two journalists, Courtier and Penrose, into allegations that Jeremy Thorpe, as a result of a long-standing homosexual affair which had eventually ended in bitterness, had conspired to murder who it was alleged he'd had the affair with, a man called Norman Scott.
You are now to retire, carefully to consider your verdict of not guilty.
In March 1995, Barings Bank went bust, and the headlines were that there was a rogue trader in their Singapore office.
Two City of London policemen and an accountant from the Serious Fraud Office arrived at Frankfurt Prison shortly before Nick Leeson's lawyer, Stephen Pollard, this morning.
Very quickly it became clear that Nick was going to admit what he'd done, but wanted to be dealt with in the UK. He wanted to be serving his time in the UK. So our task was to try and get him extradited back to London rather than to Singapore. And there weren't really any legal arguments that could be made. We had to fight that battle very much in the media. So we were in an unusual situation where we were positively looking for media coverage rather than trying to close it down as you normally would.
A few years ago, the firm decided that they wanted to expand their expertise, and it's one of the reasons actually that I joined the firm, because in government I'd built up quite a lot of experience in inquiry work. And so after I arrived, I was fortunate enough to get involved in the Hutton inquiry.
His day in court complete, the Prime Minister can only wait for Lord Hutton's verdict. But the verdict of public opinion is just as important.
Jean-Charles de Menezes was not simply acceptable collateral damage, but the victim of fundamentally flawed policies and procedures.
We'll all remember that Jean-Charles de Menezes, he was shot by SO-19 in circumstances where they believed he was one of the failed suicide bombers and was about to detonate a bomb. I remember the call coming in from the Kratos commander seeking my advice, and also from the Gold commander seeking my advice.
Immediately after Jerry and Kate McCann arrived back from Portugal, we took the decision that because there was material coming out of Portugal which was suggestive of their having been involved in what had happened to Madeleine, that we need to go and speak to the newspapers, and in particular the editors, to put them right as to the real essence of the evidence, and to seek to persuade them that they shouldn't be reporting the sort of libelous content that was beginning to come through.
In the last few years, there have been kind of progressive changes to different aspects of the criminal justice system, which have effectively meant that the person who is under investigation is being punished in one way or another by that process.
People forget that many people are arrested for things that they haven't done, and I think sometimes the way in which it's reported and the way in which the press report criminal allegation is that there's no smoke without fire, and that the very fact that the police have decided to arrest someone means that they must have done something wrong.
The work that had been done for decades building up the reputation of the firm for white-collar crime meant that we were going to have a central role in any case of any importance.
The only firm to work for was Kingsley Napley. There is nowhere else to go.